Welcome, everyone, to a special Christmas season Friday the 13th episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, Iowa's Joni Ernst is center stage in the drama over President-elect Trump's Department of Defense nominee, what Trump's deportation plans could look like in Iowa, and area education agency discussions are heating up again. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin.murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week, our Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief, Tom Barton. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Aaron.
And we have Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal with us as well. Hello, Jared.
12-1, Aaron. 12-1.
And how much of your fingernails remain, Jared, through those 12 wins?
I got like 2 or 3 left, so we're still okay.
For those who not loyal listeners, Jared is a Chiefs fan, and they have been enjoying a blessed season with 12 wins, and a lot of them of the dramatic variety.
Almost satanic matchup,
Aaron. All right. First up this week, the debate that dominated the 2024 legislative session was back again this week, just ahead of the 2025 session. That debate, of course, was over Iowa's area education agency system and Governor Kim Reynolds' proposed overhaul of the AEA's operations and funding. The new state law started going into effect earlier this year. A part of that law was a task force was created, and that task force held its first meeting. I covered that for us, so I'll just dominate the early part of the podcast here and take this. First of all, forgive me for sounding a little bit jaded as I say. It was a 5-hour meeting at the end of which they decided not to do anything. So that was fun to cover. So to back out here real quick, the task force was created to make recommendations about future changes to the AEA system. It includes 6 legislative members and 10 public members who are stakeholders in the AEA system. So we had AEA leaders, school administrators, teachers, and parents of students who use special education services. Like I said, the top line was that the task force ultimately decided not to make any recommendations at this point anyways, but they decided to gather more information and feedback on the law's impact, and then meet again in February when it may make more concrete recommendations to state lawmakers and state agency officials, and that would be right in the heart of the legislative session as well. So if you were hungry for governmental action, this was not the task force meeting for you. I will say it was an interesting and full-throated discussion. I kind of joke about the 5 hours. Part of the reason it lasted 5 hours is maybe a compliment to the way the task force was constructed, because as I said, you had all these stakeholders who very clearly had strong feelings about AEAs and special education in Iowa. And so there was a very, very robust discussion about all those issues. Just like I said, at the end of the day, they didn't actually decide to recommend anything, but they will meet again in February, get some more data, learn more from people about the impact the new law is having, and then maybe they make a recommendation. The closest thing they came to a recommendation, I'll also say before moving on here, is one small school administrator from the Mediapolis district proposed that the task force right now recommend to state lawmakers that they delay by at least 1 year what is going to be a shift in special education fundings, and it doesn't change the overall dollars, but what it does is takes 10% of the special education dollars away from the AEAs and gives them directly to school districts instead to make them for them to choose what to do with them. And that sounds like a good thing in a vacuum. There have been a lot of people who have expressed concerns about that funding shift and the impact it could have on the services that AEAs provide to all the schools in their areas. So anyway, so this task force member, this small school superintendent, proposed making that recommendation to state lawmakers, but that proposal did not pass. He did not have enough people in the camp to get that a formal recommendation. So again, at the end of the day, it was a punt, and we'll see what they decide to recommend when they come back in February. In another educational acronym in the news this week, that we just talked about, the AEAs. Jared very recently covered a public meeting that talked a lot about ESAs, which is the private school tuition assistance program that Iowa established in 2023, is being phased in, gradually increasing the number of people that are eligible for that. The voucher program, if you follow the slang and are more familiar with that. Jared, things got a little heated in that discussion, I hear. Tell us about it.
So yeah, I wrote about this on Saturday. The Sioux City Community School District was holding its first education legislative forum of the year. And they had a number of items on their priority list, but they didn't get through many of those items because a good chunk of the discussion ended up focusing on ESAs, including a few back and forth about people turning questions around on other people, and just some good stuff in that vein. The legislators that were there were Iowa State Senator Kevin Alons, and then Iowa House Reps Jacob Bossman and Bob Henderson, who all voted for the ESA legislation when it came up last year. Sioux City Community School District Superintendent Rod Earlywine, kind of early on in the discussion, very pointedly asked all three of them, right now, there's no accountability. How do you know how they're doing? There being private schools receiving money through those ESAs. And something I know we've talked about on here before as well, and you mentioned it just a second ago too, Erin, is that the ESA program is being implemented in phases. The first phase focused on students with a household income at or below 300% of the federal poverty guideline. And then for this year, it increased to 400%. And then next year, all Iowa residents are going to be able to apply for the program regardless of income. And on that point, another one of the school board officials, school board member Dan Greenwell, told Alons, Bossman, and Henderson that, quote, next year, every single student will be eligible for ESAs. Hundreds of millions of dollars going to private schools from state coffers with no accountability. That is just wrong, he told them. And then he pushed them about there being an uneven playing field between public and private schools in the state because there isn't the same level of accountability, which is a word that came up a lot. If you made a word cloud of the forum on Saturday, accountability would probably be, most of the cloud. So he chastened them for that, and then also for what he saw as a lack of transparency coming from private schools as to how they're using this influx of money they're getting because of the ESAs. So there's still a lot of agita about this. It's not going away as an issue. And I'm sure that agita is only going to ramp up when we get into the next school year, and this becomes the thing that any student in the state can be applying for.
Yeah, absolutely. The program's only going to grow, so it's going to be interesting to see how this, like you said, those kinds of discussions and debates evolve. Forgive me if you said, Jared, were there school officials of any kind of that at this meeting as well, or was it just?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. It was mostly because we not only had the superintendent for the Sioux City Community School District, but superintendents from a couple of the surrounding school districts as well. Some of which are a little bit, smaller and more rural. So yeah, and again, none of them were, of course, happy about this and the way things have progressed.
Yeah.
Jared, I'm curious, how did the Republican lawmakers respond to that, pointed criticism from the school superintendent about a lack of accountability?
Not very well, to be quite honest. A lot of it kind of just evolved into a lot of hectoring from the school district people and not a lot of talking from the legislators. Mm-hmm. So that was what made it interesting to me, is that they were not on the best footing for kind of issuing their sort of stance and way of seeing things with this.
Well, and I mean, Tom and I remember from the debate as that bill was being debated and passed, that was one of the criticisms of it from the start, right? Was that it didn't kind of have much in the way. In fact, we just heard about it again today. The revenue estimating conference met earlier today, and Democratic Senator Janet Peterson, her statement about the budget numbers was all about the private school tuition assistance and the lack of accountability and transparency in it. So that has been a flashpoint for those folks who have been critical of the program from the start.
Do you guys think there's any chance? Because even one thing that, like when I've talked to our local legislators about this, they've even said, they weren't expecting the kind of numbers that they would see in terms of people trying to use the program. Do you think there's a chance of some kind of legislative fix in the coming session? And I wonder what that would even look like. No.
I don't get that sense at all.
Certainly
not with
go away, but
right.
I wonder, yeah.
Even at the pace of rolling it out, I don't see that they would slow that down in any way. At most, I could maybe see a discussion about what, like we talked about, those transparency or accountability issues. But even that, I really, really don't think. I mean, it's just such a comfortable majority for them that they really don't feel that, and they feel emboldened by the way that all unfolded with they didn't get it passed. They went into an election and knocked out members of their own party, and then won a gubernatorial race by almost 20 points while campaigning largely on this issue. So there's just no feeling of any need whatsoever to pump the brakes on that program.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good question, though. All right. Moving on, Iowa Republican U.S. Senator Joni Ernst is under the spotlight as it pertains to President-elect Donald Trump's nomination of Pete Hegseth, a veteran and former Fox News host, to be the next director of the U.S. Department of Defense. If this sounds like a repeat, your memory serves you well. We did touch on this topic last week also, and how Hegseth has in the past that he believes that women should not serve in combat roles in the U.S. military, and that he's been accused of sexually assaulting a woman in the past, although no charges were filed. And then how Ernst, a former officer in the Army National Guard, was the first female combat veteran and elected to the U.S. Senate and is a sexual assault survivor. We bring back the topic again this week because that pressure on Ernst from Trump's supporters has not relented in the least. Probably fair to say it's only increased. And because there have been some new developments. We're not all the way quite there yet, but we're seeing at least some more interesting revelations. Tom, tell us what's the latest here.
Yeah, so Senator Ernst on Monday struck a more hopeful tune about Pete Hegseth's nomination, but stopped short of saying that she will vote yes on his nomination to become Secretary of Defense. So Senator Ernst issued a more positive assessment on Monday after what she said was a encouraging second meeting with Pete Hegseth. She said Hegseth's, quote, committed to completing a full audit of the Pentagon and selecting a senior official who will uphold the roles and values of our servicemen and women based on quality and standards, not quotas, and went on to say that he promised to prioritize and strengthen Senator Ernst's work in Congress to prevent sexual assault in the military. She also indicated that the allegations against him won't count unless victims step forward. So in that statement that Joni Ernst set out on Monday, she said that, quote, as I support Pete through this process, I look forward to a fair hearing based on truth, not anonymous sources, end quote. So as we mentioned on last week's podcast, Hegseth faces allegations of sexual impropriety, financial mismanagement, public drunkenness, and other personal misconduct. He has denied the allegations. Ernst's statement comes after a weekend of intense backlash on social media from Trump supporters and MAGA activists over her hesitancy to back Hegseth amid a building pressure campaign to confirm Trump's pick to head the Pentagon. Some Republicans have threatened to primary Joni Ernst if she runs for re-election in 2026. So Ernst and Hegseth also met last week in what Ernst at the time said was a very frank and productive conversation. But in a Fox News interview the next day, she said that she had not gotten to a yes on his confirmation. Ernst would go on to tell Real Clear Politics that she didn't plan to campaign against Hegseth and that she wanted to see the confirmation process unfold. That set off a mega firestorm on X, and Donald Trump Jr. pointed out that
Hold on, Tom. I'm sorry. Point of clarification. Did you say a mega firestorm or a MAGA firestorm?
MAGA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
Although
either applies. Yeah.
either works. So Donald Trump Jr. pointed out that Joni Ernst had voted to confirm Joe Biden's pick for Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. He suggested Ernst may be, quote, in the wrong political party, end quote. She was called spineless and worse than a rhino. Right-wing radio host Steve Deace bragged that he could be the one to topple Ernst in a 2026 primary.
I missed that. Wow.
Yeah, others suggested maybe Iowa native Carrie Lake, a staunch Trump ally and former local news anchor who unsuccessfully ran for an Arizona U.S. Senate seat this year and for Arizona governor in 2020, that maybe she could return to her home state and challenge and defeat Senator Ernst in a primary. Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA accused Ernst of leading the charge against Hegseth. This is all important because as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Joni Ernst is seen as a crucial swing vote and a key holdout who could determine, whether Pete Hegseth wins Senate approval. Hegseth told reporters Monday on Capitol Hill that he had a great meeting with Joni Ernst and praised her for her dedicated work, quote, making the Pentagon work for war fighters, end quote, and said that he appreciated the Iowa senator's commitment to the process and said that he looks forward to working together with her.
Tom, to even put a finer bow on some of that backlash, I saw in a story from Mark Caputo of the Bulwark, there was a quote of someone saying, quote, "Nobody wants to be Joni," kind of summarizing the past couple of days, which felt like a good summation of a lot of what you were talking about with that backlash to her previous stance on this nomination process.
And it's everywhere too. Tom did a great job of highlighting the people who are actually in places of influence. You also look at, if you dare, on social media posts about this and look at the comments, and holy moly, are they not happy?
Yeah. And the intensity of that, Aaron, is why I don't necessarily think that this is somehow going to save Joni Ernst from getting primaried. There's still is a chance of that even after this, because nothing in the current era has shown that just because you cave on something that people are really upset about, that doesn't guarantee that you're out of the crosshairs.
Without a doubt. The other thing that was, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just going to say, what is bewildering to me is the intensity of this backlash. Not for saying for somebody saying look, let's let this process play out. Let's have a thorough vetting of the candidate. There have been credible accusations made against this person. Let's gather more information. Let's wait and see how this plays out. See if there's any credibility to it. I could not believe that was the reaction to saying let's just make sure that we're vetting these nominees.
Yeah,
she wasn't
not a no. It's just,
it wasn't a no, and it wasn't her launching a campaign, to sink Pete Hegseth's nomination. It was just like, hey, let's see how this plays out. And it was just, I don't know, I guess remarkable to me to again just see the intensity of the backlash just to that.
Consent and advise no more.
Right.
One last thing really quick on this, a kind of peel back the curtain thing. Tom, you know this well. It was interesting. You mentioned that one statement Ernst made at one point where she said, "I support Pete through this process. And for a few hours there that afternoon, it was a very interesting political sphere where you had some people taking that as an endorsement, and then other people being like, well, hold on, is she saying she supports his nomination, or does she support the process? And you even tried clarifying with her office, and they didn't respond to it, which I thought was fascinating.
They did not, and other media outlets also reached out for clarification, including the Des Moines Register, and they did respond to the Register, but all they did was just repeated her statement saying that I support the process.
And we finally got clarification later when she spoke to another outlet, right? When she spoke to, I'm trying to remember who it was.
CNN.
That might have been.
Yeah, I think it was
that night.
Yeah, it was that day, and CNN asked her, does this mean you're a yes? And essentially, she did the same thing that her office did with the Register, just repeated that I'm supporting the process.
Yeah, which at least clarified that she didn't say yes, I'm a yes.
Right.
I don't know if you guys talked about this on a previous episode, since I've been not on here for like a month, it seems like, but another thing I've been struck by with Ernst is she seems like she has been like retweeting and like cheerleading the Doge stuff as much as like any Republican senator, because like almost everything I see from her like Twitter accounts are like stuff about Doge and like how great all these different plans are to cut like X, Y, and Z like item from the federal government, which has been striking to me how much of that there's been.
Well, that's because she created a new Doge caucus in the Senate and is the chair of that caucus. And, her whole shtick since she's been in the Senate has been
make them squeal.
Make them squeal. Right. Exactly. And so, her big thing is, doing these elaborate charts and showing government waste and fraud and abuse that she's working and championing to rein in. Her big crusade at the moment is ending remote work among federal employees, and that very much fits into that whole Doge operation, I guess.
Are we the kind of podcast? Are we gonna start asking Bailey whenever we say the word Doge that the little meme pops up on the screen? Do we want to go down that path, or should we avoid that for now?
Or we could get a little dog bark sound.
Yeah. Oh goodness! All right, before we get any other bad ideas, let's move on. Tom worked on a great story, teamed up with our Gazette colleague Emily Anderson to file a report on how President-elect Trump's hardline deportation plans could impact Iowa and Iowans. I'm just going to read here what I think is the money graph if you're looking for a broad description of Tom and Emily's story. The Gazette spoke with an economist, Iowa business leader, immigration attorney, and legal expert, as well as leaders and advocates in Iowa's immigrant community to get a sense of the potential impact of Trump's plans on Iowa families, communities, and businesses. So that summarizes it better than I ever could have. I'm not going to give away the farm here, Tom, because I want people to read your story. It published over the weekend. It's excellent. You and Emily did a great job, but maybe just give us a sense of some of what you heard from the people that you talked to while reporting the story.
So we heard a mix of fear, anxiety, and concern about mass removal of undocumented workers, leading to a tighter labor market in Iowa, higher production costs, and the separation of Iowa families, as well as skepticism that President-elect Donald Trump will be able to carry out his plans. We heard about the legal and logistical barriers to carrying out mass deportations on the scale proposed by Trump. They are substantial and would likely face significant challenges and delays. But either way, undocumented immigrants in Iowa and their advocates say that they are preparing for the worst. Tens of thousands of undocumented migrants are working across Iowa, contributing hundreds of millions of dollars to the Iowa economy, according to one estimate. So a 2022 report by the American Immigration Council about immigrants living in Iowa estimates that undocumented residents make up about 2.4% of the state's workforce, and paid $354 million in taxes, including almost 152 million going to local and state governments, and that those immigrants had a spending capacity of 1.3 billion. And an estimated roughly 26% of the state's immigrant population are undocumented residents. That same report from the American Immigration Council estimates that more than 41,000 Iowa residents live with at least one undocumented family member, and nearly 2,000 Iowa children who are U.S. citizens live with at least one undocumented parent.
Yeah, it's good stuff, and I love it because it's one of those stories that's a practical look at the potential impact of we talk a lot about policy and ideas and stuff during campaigns, and this is a great look at what the real life implications could be. So I encourage people again to find that story at the Gazette.
Sorry, I would just add that in addition to that, we also asked a legal expert and immigration attorney the question of, what should concerned immigrant families and individuals be doing? And so we did provide kind of a list of recommendations or suggestions about, what these families should be doing, could be doing, how they can be planning if they are worried and concerned about the president's deportation and immigration plans.
There you go. Excellent stuff. All right. Last thing really quick here before we go, I just wanted to make a note this week, and forgive if you're watching on the YouTubes, forgive my darting eyes because I'm going to read right from our story here. But former Congressman Jim Leach passed away. Leach, a lot of people who listen to this podcast know him well, but for those who may not be familiar, Leach represented Eastern Iowa in Congress for 30 years. He later developed a close relationship with the University of Iowa. He served on the law faculty there. Leach was 82 when he passed away this week. He served in the U.S. House from 1977 to 2007. It's the third longest tenure in Iowa history. So a well-known figure, often praised for his sort of bipartisan and moderate work in the U.S. House. We're not going to have a lot to say this week because, frankly, the two people most qualified to talk about that are the two who couldn't be with us today. Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times. Congressman Leach was from Davenport, and she wrote the story for us this week. And then Todd Dorman, who has covered Congressman Leach and knows a lot about him. Neither Sarah nor Todd could make it for scheduling reasons this week. So hopefully we'll have them available for next week's podcast, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more and remember Congressman Leach in next week's episode. I will say, and I can't remember if I said this. I don't think I must not have said it on the air in the past. It might have been in our discussions, but if it was on the air, forgive me for the repeat. If you happen to be fortunate enough to know Rod Boshart, the retired Gazette reporter, the next time you see him, ask him to tell his Jim Leach story. It is amazing. If I could even remotely do it justice, I would. It's a long story too, so I probably couldn't either way. But I'll just tell you that any listeners out there in the Venn diagram of On Iowa Politics listeners who know Rod Boshart, if you're in there, ask him to tell his Jim Leach story. That'll do it for this week's episode. We thank you as always for tuning in. If you're not already, please subscribe us on your streaming service of choice, or on YouTube where we are now, and you can smash that like button there. You can also find the podcast each and every week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. Now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. Almost every morning. It's been on hiatus lately because I've been a little bit under the weather in evenings, it seems like. So we'll get back on it, though, I promise. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And lastly, don't forget the work you heard here of everyone that you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Sioux Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom Barton, Jared McNett, and our producer Bailey.cichon, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.